Welcome back, everyone. So you wanted us to dive into this deceptively simple question. What is religion?
Yeah, we got a whole bunch of academic papers by sociologists who've spent a lot of time trying to figure that out.
And it gets,
A lot more complicated than you'd think.
oh yeah,
Right.
it really does.
You think defining religion
You'd think it'd be easy?
would be pretty straightforward.
Straightforward, but
It's slippery.
it is. It's like
It's like
trying to grab.
it's like trying to grab smoke.
Yeah. We all kind of have a general idea.
Right.
But then when you really try to pin it down,
When you try to nail it down.
it's just
Exactly. And that's what makes this deep dive so fun.
Yes.
We're going to be looking at all these different ways that sociologists have tried to define religion and why those definitions often fall short
Right.
and what that tells us about, the nature of belief and belonging.
Right. Exactly. And just a heads up, even Buddhism, which you might think fits really neatly into the religion category, kind of ends up
Challenges those definitions.
challenging those definitions.
For sure.
So buckle up, everyone.
This is going to be a ride.
This is going to be a thought-provoking ride, I think.
It really is. One of the first things you learn when you study religion is the more you look at it,
Uh-huh.
the less sure you are about what it actually is.
Okay, so let's start with those attempts to define religion.
Okay.
From what I've been reading, sociologists have kind of taken two main approaches.
Right.
Substantive and functional.
Yep.
Could you break those down for us a little bit?
Absolutely. So the substantive approach tries to define religion based on its content,
Okay.
like what it's made of, the essential ingredients.
Got it.
So a really classic example is E.B. Tyler's definition, way back in the 19th century.
Okay.
He said religion is basically belief in spiritual beings.
Okay, so that's like believing in something bigger than yourself. I'm guessing it's not quite that straightforward.
You're catching on really quickly.
Yeah.
The problem with that definition is it excludes a lot of traditions that don't have a belief in gods or spirits.
Right.
So, for example, you've got Jainism, which focuses on self-discipline and nonviolence, or some forms of Buddhism,
Right.
where the emphasis is more on, achieving enlightenment rather than worshiping a deity.
So trying to define religion based on a specific belief system
Doesn't work
doesn't really work because
because there's too much diversity.
there's so much diversity out there.
That's one of the big challenges.
Okay.
And that leads us to the second approach, functionalism.
Okay.
So instead of looking at what religion is, this looks at what is,
Okay.
like its function in society,
So less about the beliefs themselves and more about
the role that those beliefs play,
the role they play.
right, in people's lives, in communities, in societies.
In communities.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
So big name here is Emil Durkheim, another really prominent sociologist. He argued that religion is basically a system of beliefs and practices that are oriented towards something sacred.
Okay.
And, and this creates a sense of solidarity and social cohesion. It brings people together.
Right. So it's about like shared values, shared rituals, that sense of
Belonging to something bigger than yourself.
belonging. Yeah.
Right.
Okay. But I can already see a
Yeah.
potential problem with that.
Right.
Can you say the same thing about like
Totally.
a sports team or a political movement?
Oh, absolutely. You're right on the money.
Yeah.
That's one of the criticisms.
Bring people together.
Right.
They
Yeah.
have their shared rituals.
Of the functionalist approach, it can be so broad that it's hard to tell the difference between religion and other social phenomena.
Yeah. Where do you
Where's the line?
draw the line? Like, is a football game a religion just because it,
Right.
unites people?
Right.
I mean,
It's like, yeah, is a football game a religion? I mean, some fans get pretty
some people get pretty intense about it.
intense.
Yeah. So,
It highlights the challenge at using a purely functional definition.
right.
Because if everything that creates social cohesion is religion,
Right.
then the word kind of loses its meaning.
Loses all meaning. Yeah.
Yeah.
So we've got these two approaches, substantive, focusing on beliefs, functional, focusing on kind of the social role.
Right.
And both of them seem to have their problems.
Totally.
It seems like defining religion is a bit like trying to nail jelly to a wall.
That is a fantastic analogy. I love that.
And then to make things even more complicated,
Yeah.
you've got traditions like Buddhism, which seem to
Right.
defy both of those approaches.
Right. Buddhism is really interesting because it really challenges our assumptions about what we think a religion has to have.
Yeah, I was just thinking about that. Yeah, some people might say Buddhism's not even a religion.
Right.
Because it doesn't have a,
God.
in traditional sense.
And the traditional. Right.
sense. Yeah.
And actually some Buddhist traditions,
Right.
like Theravada Buddhism, in Southeast Asia,
Right.
is often described as non-theistic,
Okay.
meaning that they don't focus on a belief in God or gods in the way that Christianity or Islam do.
But then don't they still have the Buddha? That
That's
seems
where the
this is where
secret.
nuances come in.
Yeah,
Some argue that while the Buddha is obviously a very important figure, he's revered, he's not seen as a supernatural being.
right,
In the same way that the God of, say, the Abrahamic religions is,
right,
he was a human who, through his own efforts,
right.
achieved a state of awakening.
Achieved enlightenment.
Yeah.
So even the question of whether Buddhism involves belief in superhuman beings
Is up for debate.
is up for debate.
Yeah, it's not a simple yes or no.
And that's just one example.
Right. And even within Buddhism,
Right.
there's huge diversity in terms of beliefs and practices.
Yeah.
There are some communities that, incorporate gods and spirits and others that don't. Okay.
There are some that really emphasize meditation and mindfulness.
Right.
Others that are very much focused on devotional practices.
So even within just a single tradition like Buddhism,
Right. There's a spectrum.
there's this whole...
It makes it hard to pin down using any one definition.
That makes it really hard to pin down, yeah.
Yeah.
So maybe trying to find
It's the wrong approach.
a single essential definition of religion.
Maybe there is no one.
Right
It's
answer.
an across approach.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe there's not one right answer.
That's what it's starting to look like.
Yeah, and that's where things get really interesting, I think.
Yeah.
Because it forces us to think about religion in a whole new way.
In a whole new way.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Where do we go from here?
All right, well, to understand this new way of thinking, we need to take a little detour
Okay.
into the world of philosophy.
Right.
Specifically, a guy named Ludwig Wittgenstein.
The philosopher.
Yes.
Always a good time. Wittgenstein had some really, really interesting ideas about language and how we define things.
Okay.
And one of his key concepts is this idea of family resemblances.
Family resemblances. What do
Yeah.
you mean?
Okay, think about this. You and your siblings,
Okay.
you might share some features, like your mom's nose
Yeah.
or your dad's eyes, but you're not identical.
Right.
You're connected by this, network of overlapping similarities,
Okay.
not one single defining feature.
Okay, I'm with you so far.
Right.
But how does this relate to religion?
So Wittgenstein used the example of games to explain this.
Okay.
So there is no one thing that makes all games games.
Okay.
Some involve competition, others are solitary,
Right.
some require physical skill, others are based on luck. But we still call them all games
Because
because
we recognize those.
they're family resemblance.
Family resemblances.
Right.
Okay.
So what if we apply this same kind of thinking to religion? Instead of getting hung up on finding the one true definition of religion,
Yeah.
what if we looked for those, shared characteristics?
The shared characteristics, even if
Right, even if they don't all have the same ingredient.
I don't all have that one essential ingredient.
Right, exactly.
I like that.
So some scholars have suggested that we view religion more as a spectrum
Okay.
with fuzzy boundaries
Right.
rather than a category with really rigid rules.
I like that a lot.
Right. This allows us to acknowledge all that diversity,
Yeah.
and it avoids that trap of excluding traditions that don't fit the narrow definition.
That's really helpful, that family resemblance thing.
Yeah.
It makes a lot of sense to me.
Yeah.
It allows for that nuance.
Totally.
Recognizes that religion isn't this monolithic thing.
Absolutely.
Okay, so we've explored the search for essence.
Yep.
The history of the word religion.
Hmm.
Wittgenstein's family resemblances. What about religion in today's world? I mean, does this concept, born in the West, does it still hold meaning in a globalized society?
That's a great question, and one that causes a lot of debate.
I bet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
There are some scholars, like Timothy Fitzgerald, who argue that religion is actually a Western imposition,
Okay.
a concept that distorts our understanding of non-Western cultures.
So they're saying that by using this term, religion,
We're forcing other cultures.
we're forcing other cultures into a box that doesn't necessarily
into a framework that doesn't really fit.
fit their reality.
Right. They argue that religion is a product of Western history
Okay.
and carries all these assumptions with it,
Right.
like the separation of the sacred and the secular,
Yeah.
a belief in supernatural beings, and so on. And they're saying, well, those assumptions might not apply universally.
So are they saying we should just get rid of the word religion altogether?
Fitzgerald actually does advocate for abandoning the concept of religion.
Wow. Okay.
He thinks it's more trouble than it's worth. But other scholars, like Jonathan Z. Smith, have a different take.
Okay. What do they say?
Smith acknowledges that religion, it is a scholar-made tool,
Yeah.
it's a category that we have constructed,
Right.
but he argues that we're free to define it in ways that are useful for our
Right.
analysis.
So it's less about finding that one true perfect definition
Right.
and more about just using religion as a lens to help us understand
Right. Human behavior.
human behavior, beliefs, social structures.
Exactly. So for Smith, religion is more like a heuristic device.
Okay, heuristic device.
Big word.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's a fancy term, but it basically means
Break it down for us.
a mental shortcut. It's a way of simplifying really complex information so we can understand it.
Okay.
So instead of starting from scratch, every time we encounter some new belief system,
Right.
we can use this concept of religion to kind of quickly categorize it
Okay.
and start thinking about its role in society.
That makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's not about
Yeah.
finding the one true definition.
Right.
It's about using religion as a tool to explore.
As a lens, right?
Yeah, the vast landscape of human
experience.
beliefs and practices.
So, yeah.
Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
And this brings up another point that I think is interesting, that even though religion originated in the West,
Right.
it has become a global term.
It has. It's fascinating.
People all over the world use it.
They do. And not just academics. I mean, it's in everyday conversations.
Oh, wow.
Legal documents, political debates.
Yeah.
It's part of the global vocabulary now.
That's interesting. So
Yeah.
even though it's got this very kind of Western history,
Yeah,
it's obviously resonating with people all over the world.
it is. And that raises the question, why?
Right. Why is this word?
Why is this word?
With all its baggage and limitations.
With all its baggage. Yeah, why is it still so powerful?
Yeah, I think it speaks to that human need to make sense of
Right.
the big questions.
The big questions.
Like,
Yeah.
why are we here? What
Right.
happens after we die?
Is there something bigger than ourselves?
Is there something bigger than us?
Yeah, I think you're right. Religion, even if it's, an imperfect category,
Yeah.
it gives us a framework for thinking about these really fundamental questions.
It gives us a language to talk about those things that are hard to talk about.
Yeah, things that are hard to put into words.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
And it connects us to community, right? Like a shared history, a sense of belonging,
Right.
which I guess kind of takes us back to that functionalist
Yeah.
approach that we were talking about.
You made a great connection there.
Right.
Yeah, even if we acknowledge that religion is a construct, we can't deny that it plays this really powerful role
Right. It's not just this
in shaping lives and societies.
abstract concept.
It has real
It's got
world consequences.
there's real world consequences.
And those consequences are often tied to how we define it.
Right?
So let's look at some examples.
Yeah. Give me some concrete examples of how the definition of religion has real world implications.
Okay, let's do that.
Yep.
Yeah, it's a tricky one, that's for sure. It's funny, we've been talking about these challenges of defining religion,
Right.
but the word itself actually has a history
Okay.
that adds another layer of complexity to all of this.
Oh, really?
Yeah,
I always love a good word origin story.
yeah. Well, it turns out that many languages, historically, didn't even have a word
Mm-hmm.
that directly translates to our modern concept of religion.
Interesting.
Even the Latin word religio, where we get our English word religion,
Mm-hmm.
originally meant something different.
Oh, okay. So what did it mean way back then?
It was much more about rituals and practices, a sense of duty or obligation,
Mm-hmm.
almost like a sense of reverence for something larger than oneself,
Okay.
but not necessarily in a supernatural sense.
Interesting.
Yeah.
And so how do we go from rituals and duty to
Right.
this idea of belief systems about God?
That's a great question. And historians have kind of traced this shift to a few key moments. One of the big ones was the Enlightenment back in the 17th and 18th centuries.
Okay.
During that time, European societies were encountering a much wider range of cultures and beliefs
Mm-hmm.
through exploration and colonialism.
So they needed a way to
They needed a way to categorize it all.
categorize all these different
ways
ways of seeing the world.
of thinking about the world.
Yeah.
And that's really where our modern idea of religion as a distinct category starts to emerge.
It's like they created this box labeled religion
Yeah.
and started trying to fit everything they found.
They're trying to fit everything in it.
They do it.
And of course, not everything fit very neatly.
Right.
But the idea stuck.
Yeah.
And as European influence spread, so did this concept of religion.
It's fascinating how a word can just evolve like that. carrying all this, like, historical baggage.
It really is.
So are you saying that religion, as we understand it today, is basically a product of Western thought?
To a large extent, yes. And that's something that scholars like
Yeah.
Timothy Fitzgerald, have really emphasized.
Mm.
They argue that the term religion itself is a Western imposition
Okay.
that distorts how we understand other cultures.
I see what they mean, because if you're starting with a definition that's based on Western assumptions,
Right.
you're going to miss out on a lot of the nuances of other traditions.
Exactly. You're going to miss a lot of the richness and the complexity.
Yeah.
Fitzgerald actually goes so far as to say that we should just abandon the concept of religion
Wow.
altogether.
Really?
He thinks it's a very misleading category,
Great.
and it doesn't do justice to the diversity that's out there.
So what do you do if you can't use the word religion? How do we even talk about this stuff?
Right. Well, there are other scholars, like Jonathan Z. Smith,
Okay.
who have a different perspective on this.
Okay.
They acknowledge that religion is a construct, a category we've created,
Uh-huh.
but they argue that we can still use it as a tool for understanding, as long as we're aware of its limitations.
So it's kind of like a map.
Yeah?
It's not the territory itself, but it can help us
It helps us navigate.
navigate
Yeah.
that complexity.
It's a great analogy. I love that.
It helps us make sense of it all.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Smith argues that religion, even though it's, scholar-made, can still be a useful heuristic device.
Oh, okay. Heuristic device. There's another one of those fancy terms.
I know. Too many big words, sorry.
Break it down for us regular folk.
Basically, all it means is a mental shortcut. Okay, it's a way of simplifying complex information so we can wrap our heads around it.
I got it.
So instead of having to start from scratch every time we come across some new belief system,
Right.
we can use this concept of religion
To help us
to quickly categorize it
categorize it.
and
Or-
think about how it functions in society.
Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
So it's not about finding that one perfect definition.
Right.
It's more about using religion as a tool
Bolin.
to help us explore this whole world of human experience.
Exactly. The vast landscape of human beliefs and practices.
That makes a lot of sense.
Yeah. And this brings up another point that I think is really fascinating.
Okay.
Even though religion has this Western origin, it's become this global term.
You mean like people all over the world use the word religion?
Yeah, they do. And not just academics. I mean, it's in everyday language.
Oh, wow.
It's used in legal documents, in political debates. It's really become part of a global vocabulary.
That is really interesting.
It is.
So even though it's got this like Western history,
Right.
it's obviously connecting with people
It is, yeah.
all over.
It really is.
Which begs the question, why?
Why is this term, with all its baggage and limitations, still so powerful?
Why is it so resonant?
Yeah.
I think it speaks to that human need to make sense of the big questions,
The big questions.
Like, why are we here? What happens after we die?
Is there something bigger than ourselves? I think you're absolutely right. Religion, even if it's an imperfect category,
Yeah.
gives us a framework
A framework.
for grappling with those questions.
A language to talk about them.
A language, exactly, because these are things that are really hard to put into words sometimes.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And it connects us to a community, right? Like a shared history,
Oh, yeah.
sense of belonging.
Yeah.
Which I guess kind of brings us back to that functionalist approach we were talking about earlier.
You've made a great connection.
Right.
Because even though we can say, yeah, religion is a construct, it's something we've created.
Yeah.
It's undeniable that it plays this powerful role
Yeah, it's no
in shaping our lives and our societies.
It's not just this abstract
It's not just an idea.
concept. It has
real-world consequences.
real-world consequences. Exactly.
And those consequences are often tied to how we define it.
Right. And that's what I want to get into. Like, what are some concrete examples of how the definition of religion actually has real-world implications?
Let's do it. Yeah, so we've talked about how tricky it is to, define religion.
Right.
But those definitions, they really matter
Yeah.
when we look at, the legal and social implications.
Uh-huh.
One area where this really plays out is in those legal battles over tax-exempt status.
Right.
In the U.S., religious organizations are often exempt from paying certain taxes.
Right.
But the question of what actually counts as a religious organization,
Right.
it can get really messy.
I bet. Yeah. I mean, there must be a ton of groups that would love to have that tax-exempt status.
Oh, absolutely.
Whether or not they actually fit the traditional definition of religion.
You're exactly right. There have been tons of court cases
Wow.
where groups like Scientology, for example,
Right.
have fought to be recognized as a religion
To get those
to
benefits.
get those tax benefits.
There you go.
Exactly. And these cases often hinge on, like, really specific legal interpretations of what a religion is.
So the way we define religion literally has
Consequences.
financial consequences. Yeah, it determines who
Who gets a tax break?
gets a tax break.
Exactly.
Wow.
And it's not just money.
Right.
The definition of religion also affects, like, people's basic rights and freedoms.
Yeah.
Think about conscientious objector status.
You mean like the right to refuse military service based on your beliefs?
Exactly. So during times of war, individuals whose religious beliefs say they shouldn't fight,
Right.
they can apply for this conscientious objector status.
Right.
But then again, who decides which beliefs are religious enough to
Right.
get that exemption?
That's a really tricky one. I mean, where do you
It is. There's no
draw a line?
clear line. Right.
Yeah.
It often depends on how religion is being defined and interpreted
Okay.
within a specific social and legal context.
Right.
And this really highlights what we've been saying. Religion is a concept that we create.
Right.
It's not something that just exists independently.
Right. It's like we're trying to take this thing that's fluid and multifaceted and put it in this box.
It's fixed definition.
Like a fixed definition. Yeah.
Those definitions are always going to leave some people out.
Right. They're going to exclude certain experiences.
Exactly.
And that's why it's so important to be aware of the power that these definitions hold,
yes.
especially when it comes to something as like loaded as religion.
Because those definitions have real consequences.
They do. They shape
They shape
laws, they shape policies.
people's lives.
People's lives, yeah.
So next time you hear someone talking about religion,
Uh-huh.
don't just accept their definition.
Right.
Think about it. What's behind that definition? What assumptions are they making?
what assumptions are they making?
Who are they including? And who are they excluding?
It's like we're all walking around with these invisible frameworks that shape how we see the world,
Yeah.
but we don't even know they're there.
Exactly. But by, like, bringing them to light,
Right.
we can start to have more productive and more understanding conversations.
Absolutely. This has been fascinating.
It has.
I feel like I've learned so much, but I also, I have more questions now
Oh, that's a good sign.
than when we started,
Yeah, that means you're really engaging.
which is kind of the whole point, right?
Absolutely. That's what this is all about.
The deep dive is all about, pushing the boundaries of what we know.
Yeah.
And embracing that complexity.
Embracing the complexity, right?
Yeah, so to wrap things up, I want to leave everyone with this thought that if religion is a construct,
Right.
if it's something that we create,
Something we make.
then that means we have the power to reshape it.
We do.
We can create new definitions that are more inclusive,
Right.
that reflect the diversity of people's experience.
Absolutely. It's an ongoing process.
It is.
There's no easy answers.
There's no easy answers.
But the first step is recognizing those limitations.
Right.
And then we can start to imagine new possibilities.
That's a great note to end on. A call to action for all the deep divers out there.
Indeed it is.
Keep questioning, keep exploring, and keep diving deeper.
Couldn't say it better myself.
Until next time, everyone, keep those minds churning.